speaker for the day.
Thank you. That's great applause. I appreciate it. I will give a shout out. The last two sergeant at arms have been the best probably in history. So thank you so much. Interestingly, after watching Meredith work the room, I kind of felt like she maybe ought to be introducing me. So as many people that know her, but real quickly, Stillwater High School grad and OSU grad. She has a master's in psychology from Wayne State University. She worked for the CIA clandestinely for 25 years in Eurasia, the Near East, Africa, and Europe. She returned here in 2014, and she brought her two grandchildren to listen to this. It's Jules and Nate. So thank you guys for being here from the Washington, D.C. area. And also, Meredith was a Rotarian in Northern Virginia. So come on up. Thank you.
Okay. This works. How nice. You have on your table a couple of these notes. Yeah. So this first part, I'm going to talk to you about the intelligence community. And I want to do an overview because I think all Americans, all taxpayers ought to at least have kind of Intelligence 101 and be able to understand how your intelligence community works. But then I want to talk to you also specifically about my organization, about the CIA and my career. But you'll notice there are no written notes on any of that. So yeah, okay. So we'll talk about that, and then we're going to leave some time for questions also. And ask me anything you want, and I'll tell you if I can't answer them. My grandchildren over here are going to be excuse me, watching them and giving me signals here. So let's look at this. What is intelligence? There's a definition here, and it's basically just information. Yeah. And we need that information in the US government to help foreign policy makers, and not even now, it's domestic policy makers as well, make informed decisions. Okay. The intelligence community, and this is really important for Americans to understand, the intelligence community does not advise. Yeah. So when the president says, yeah, I'm in, and I'll get the advice from the intelligence community, that's not what we do. What we do is simply tell the policymakers, and the president is the big one, tell the policymakers what we know, what information we have gathered. We also, with all information that's gathered from any agency, and we'll go through that, we also kind of grade that information. So we will tell policymakers not necessarily who the source is, and I'm talking about clandestinely acquired information from the CIA. You don't tell them who the source is, but you tell them, does the source have a good reporting record? Do they, has it been substantiated by other sources? So any intelligence that comes in, whether it's clandestinely collected and that's covertly collected. Yeah. The difference, what's the opposite? What is it if it's collected overt, right? So those are the two big differentiations in the intelligence community. So let's look at this. I'm not going to read this to you. I'm just going to show it to you and follow along, and then those of you who actually want this for some reason can keep it, and I'll send it out again if anybody else wants another copy and you can't get it. So interestingly, when I was growing up in the agency, I joined in 79 actually, and when I was growing up in the agency, the CIA was the Central Intelligence Agency, and it was the controlling agency for the entire intelligence community. Its director was not only the director of the CIA, but was the director of all intelligence. With 9/11 and the resulting intelligence reform, because if you'll remember, everybody blamed the intelligence agencies for not having that information, and certainly blamed the intelligence agencies for not talking to each other. So what came out of 9/11 then in 2004 was the Intelligence Reform Bill that then provided for an overview agency to look at the coordination to ensure that all of those agencies were coordinated. Does that make sense? Okay, so here you go. The U.S. Intelligence Agency has 6 objectives, obviously collection, the production, dissemination of the intelligence. So when you get the intelligence, it's got to be given out. The intelligence collection of information and the conduct of activities of any kind to protect that are activities directed against the United States. And that's generally terrorism, counterterrorism. Special activities are those that we conduct, and it is almost solely military and CIA, NSA to some degree now with all of the cyber stuff that's happening. Special activities are those activities that are conducted without the name or the association of the USG. Think about this now in the world, in the cyber world, because this is really coming to fore now about how we're going to work in that world in terms of both collecting and stopping cyber attacks against the United States. Administrative and support activities also, and then any other intelligence activities that the president deems necessary. So flip over here. Here's how it's organized now. So instead of having the director of the CIA be in charge of all of the intelligence, we now have a new office since 2004, and that is what's called the DNI. You know, I live in the world of Washington where everything is initials. So when you hear the DNI, that's the Director of National Intelligence. And within that office, then you have those centers. You see that on the second page: counterterrorism, the cyber intelligence. It's everything to do with the cyber world. Counterproliferation, which is weapons of mass destruction, and largely that now is directed at countries. If you're looking at what we need information about big programs of weapons of mass destruction, what are the countries we're talking about? Predominantly right now, you're talking about Iran and North Korea, right? We have a pretty good gauge of all those other programs, but for what we call CP or counterproliferation, it's going to be North Korea and Iran. And then counterintelligence and security center. Counterintelligence, what we call CI, and I talked to a couple of you who actually worked in that realm, either in the military or other places in the government. Counterintelligence is trying to detect and then counter programs that other intelligence organizations, foreign intelligence organizations, are perpetrating against the United States. So right now, we are really looking at China and Russia in terms of their cyber attacks, right? Counterintelligence. So that's an important concept to understand. The program managers, now, there are in the intelligence community, there are 17 intelligence organizations. Look at that and look at what they are. The program managers, and these are the leaders in the intelligence community: the Central Intelligence Agency, DIA, the Defense Intelligence, FBI, NSA, NGA, the Geospatial Intelligence. You know, these are the people who do all of the space and some mapping, and then the National Reconnaissance Office, and that's the satellite program for the United States, the intelligence satellite program, you know, those that are up there taking pictures of whatever it is that, you know, they want to take pictures of. So those are the main program managers. And under that, then, and people don't realize this, you have the departmentals. And look at that list of departments: Energy, Homeland Security, State Treasury, and DEA. Also, another big intelligence provider, and I don't know why we never put it on here, is the Department of Agriculture. They have an intelligence component. And I mean, what is it? What kind of information do we want internationally that the Department of Agriculture would be collecting? Pardon? Food security. Can I have that glass? Food security for one thing. And also when you're looking at countries like Russia, for instance, it's important to know what kinds of crops are growing and can they support themselves. North Korea, you know, everybody refers to them as grass eaters. It's a good reason because they're eating grass because they don't have anything else. China, for instance, can they support their own population and support the population of others? So agriculture does do quite a bit of intelligence reporting, although they're not considered in the realm of the agencies. Second. And then every military has its own intelligence wing too. Up until just a little while ago, the Marines did not. But about 3 years ago, the Marines also joined in and they have an intelligence wing now as well. So flip over here. And I put this in here because it's always, I don't know, if you're reading news in depth, you'll hear these terms. This is basically a list of the collection disciplines we have. And when you see int on the end of it, that means it's an intelligence discipline. So SIGINT is signals intelligence. That is the collection of everything that's in the air or on wire underground, you know, something, and that's NSA. That's NSA in particular that heads that. IMINT is imagery, and that's mapping. MASCENT, interestingly, MASCENT is the collection of sometimes infrared, any kind of pulse intelligence. On the border, we do a lot of tracking of immigration coming over, and that's tracked by heat waves and all kinds of things, not just big walls. So that's MASCENT, and that's basically the defense intelligence. Open source, NGA, GeoInt, that's again mapping. And then the last is human intelligence, HUMINT, and that's what I did for a living. Human intelligence is the clandestine collection. Most of these other collections are overt. The departmentals, the military, the other agencies, when they collect intelligence, they will say, hello, I'm a representative of the United States government. Could you tell me about X? Yeah, does that make sense? That is overt collection. 98% of all of the intelligence collected in the United States is overt collection. 2% is covert collection. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Every year we survey the foreign policy makers and we ask them what is the most important intelligence that you received. And every year since 1946, it has been human intelligence, that 2%. We are called the collectors of last resort. Here's the way collection works. Every day, the policymakers, and who makes foreign policy or domestic policy in the United States? President, vice president, the Congress, Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury. So, you know, the national security advisors, they are spoken to every day and they are asked the question, what is it that you want to know that will help you in making decisions about whatever it is you're making decisions about? Yeah. So in other words, what is the gap? What is it that you already know what you know, but what is it that you don't know? What is that gap that needs to be filled? And the answers to that go to the DNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. And there is an office there called the National Tasking Office that then looks at all of those requests, because basically that's what we're talking about. They're requests for information. And they farm those requests out to the agencies that are most likely to be able to collect that. Does that make sense? So if it's on energy, if it's on the Department of Energy, for instance, manages all of the national labs. A great deal of collection goes on in national labs. So that's, those questions would be farmed out to them. If there are military questions, then they go to the military, whatever. If you can't get it anyplace else, you come to the CIA, to the office the part of the CIA that I have worked in all my life, which is the Director of Operations. We are the collectors in the agency. So let me finish off with this. So the IC oversight, yes, these are the senators. The HIPC is the House of Representatives. The can you see this on the bottom of the page? The House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and who the members are. Mark Wayne Mullen is the only Oklahoman who sits on that. And then for the Senate, it is the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And Jim Inhofe is an ex officio member because of his role on the military committee, on the Armed Forces Committee. So let me go back now to the agency, to the CIA. The CIA has 5 different directorates. It has an administrative directorate. It has a science and technology directorate that provides all the science and technology that we need for collection. It used to run the satellite program for the United States, but now that has gone into the National Reconnaissance Office. We also have then the Directorate of Operations, which is the only clandestine group in the CIA. Most of the CIA can say, yeah, I work for the CIA. People like me cannot say that until we are retired. And then only in certain situations and with the permission of the CIA. So I'm standing up here with, we have to always say who we're talking to. So I can do that. And then we have the Directorate of Intelligence, or analysis. It used to be called the Director of Intelligence. Now it's analysis. And they are the folks that put out all of the information to the DNI and to the president and everybody who is briefed daily. The president of the United States and the vice president are briefed on a daily basis. It's called the president's daily brief. And the president chooses to have it whenever he wants it, or chooses to participate or not participate. I'll give you an example. The Bushes, because Papa Bush, was once director of the CIA, took it every day religiously at 6 o'clock in the morning. And that's the way they started their day. And his son did the same thing. Clinton, interestingly, only took the president's daily brief twice in 8 years. He let Al Gore, his deputy, always handle everything. But if you look back at that time, there was not that much conflict that the United States was engaged in overseas. And at the same time, Clinton cut our agency and the Directorate of Operations by 37%. I was in the middle of it, and he said, we don't need to do that. Gentlemen don't read gentlemen's mail, and we have no need for that. As soon as he got out of office, the CIA went to Congress and said, oh, man, you guys are really missing the boat. We do need that, and we need to increase the number of officers, because people like me, our whole group of, we are called operations officers, the spies, were reduced by 37%. So at one point, I was living in Vienna at the time. I was called home to set up a recruitment center and recruit a very large number of officers, and to do it quickly. And Congress was very supportive of that. And we've been going since then. So what we do in the clandestine service, or the Directorate of Operations, is we get that tasking that comes from the DNI, and we decide what offices in the world have the best access to that. Now, if, for instance, what do you think right now? What are the 5 countries that we're tasking on that are probably the most important for us? What do you think right now? Iran. What did you say? What was the top of the list? North Korea, Russia, China, Iran. Is that 5? Name another. We kind of know what's going on in Syria without having to do a lot of intelligence. Oh, we never say we spy on Israel. I'm not saying we don't. I'm just saying we never say we spy on Israel. Yeah, and interestingly, Saudi Arabia probably is number 5 on that list right now. So, yeah, so we get this tasking, and now think about this. We have offices. We don't acknowledge them, but we have offices in most countries in the world. They are attached generally to embassies. We who work overseas, and I served in the agency for about 30 years, and I spent probably 20 plus years of those overseas. And I lived undercover. So we never admit to working for the CIA when we're overseas. Why not? That would be a dangerous thing to do. We don't do that. So we are working under cover of another organization, government organization, or something else. Yeah. People always say, well, what do you tell your kids? Well, I'm not taking Johnny overseas and saying, Johnny, your name for the next 2 years is going to be, Smith. We don't do that. When we live and work overseas, we live and work in our true names. But then about half of the time while we're overseas, we will travel to other countries and work in other aliases. Now, interestingly, I spent my life doing that and had, numbers of identities and worked all over. It's almost impossible to do that anymore. Why? Give me 1995 and a good computer, and I can tell you whether you're really that name, right? Because there's no mortgage under your name. There's no car payments. There's no medical record. There's no anything. When I was growing up, I could print my business card and say, hey, my name is X and this is what I do. And the CIA would give me a company back home that would cover me. And I could be anything I wanted to be. Anything that would get me close to someone who had the information that I wanted, because that's what we do. What we do in the clandestine service is we take that tasking and we identify worldwide who has access to that information. Yeah. You want information on the Pakistani nuclear program. Where am I going to find those people? And believe me, with the Paks, you're going to find them in Pakistan because Paks have them locked up in a fort outside of Rawalpindi, and you can't get close to them. But hopefully you can, or you get close to somebody who knows them, who knows somebody. But it's my job then to be able to answer. So I need to figure out who has that information. And then I need to, as an operations officer, figure out how I can develop a relationship, or at least get to meet that person and determine whether that person, 2 things, has that information that I need, and secondly, would ever be willing to give it to me. And if I think that might be the case, then I do whatever I can to develop a relationship with that person. So when I serve overseas, I've got 5 or 6 of those questions that are coming to me, and I'm developing relationships with 5 or 6 people, maybe even more. But I'm also taking into my responsibility assets or agents. We are not agents. When you turn on your television or you listen to a movie and somebody calls somebody a CIA agent, they're wrong unless they're talking about a foreigner who cooperates with us. Those are CIA agents. People like me, CIA officers, are operations officers. We are not what do they call us? I don't know. whatever, but we are operations officers. That's it. And we're not agents. FBI has agents, DEA has agents, the IRS has agents. We're talking about IRS agents. Yeah, we are not. We are officers. So what I do then also, I'm developing relationships with people to see if they will provide me information. But I will also take as responsibility people who have already been recruited as agents and who live there. And I work with them to have them provide that information to me. I keep them safe. I train them on how to stay safe, and I keep them alive. So that's my life. My tours, I was married to an ops officer. I came into the agency because my husband was an operations officer. We were married long before that. But the agency, when I came in 79, or when he was recruited in 79, even though I had the same background as he, the agency wouldn't take women. Oh yeah, same old story. Yeah. So they wouldn't take women because they didn't think women could do the job. FBI wouldn't take women into agent positions. The military would not take women into frontline positions either. And in 1972, the State Department sure wouldn't take women in as diplomats. So in 1972, the women in the State Department sued the State Department because they said, we have the same qualifications as all these men. Why can't we be diplomats? And they won their suit. So all of the other government agencies ran scared and started figuring out how they were going to hire women. Well, when my husband came in 79, his first tour was a very dangerous, very deep cover tour. And for me to go with him, I had to go through his training with him. And I did real well at it. And when we went overseas, the bad guys were all over him. And so I got to do a lot of the work. So when we came back in 81, the CIA came to me and said, okay, you're a sure thing, sweetie pie, and we will bring you in as an operations officer if you want to do that. Well, I was a teacher. I had, all these credentials, and I realized that if I was going to stay married to this guy, I was going to be who was also from Stillwater. I was going to be following him around, and every 2 years, I was going to have to go to a new job because we only stay in a post 2 or 3 years. So, yeah, what the heck? I did real well in the training that I'd gone through with him. And I grew up overseas. My dad was in the military. I grew up in Europe. So I enjoyed that. And I thought, well, okay, I'll do this. So I came in as one of the first women. I was the first married woman and the first mother to work as a spy in the CIA, because it was, believe me, it was all men, and they had real problems with that. But so I went through training, and I'd already gone through a lot of that training. So no surprise, I finished #1 in my class. And that kind of, to the agency, we didn't really think women could do this. And then went overseas. So served in Russia. I was a Soviet officer, both my husband and I, Soviet officers. And we are called denied area officers. You have to go through a special training. And that means that you serve and work in countries where the local government is chasing you, right? KGB, point of fact. So served in Russia, went to Turkey. The Turks were all over us. Went to Turkey because the Russians were there big time, still are. And it's geopolitically a very important country for us. I'm a Turkish linguist. Went then to Ethiopia. I have a story to tell about this. Went to Ethiopia because Ethiopia back then was, Haile Selassie had been killed. OSU had that great relationship with Ethiopia, and it was Soviet controlled. The Soviets were there as kind of a last ditch stand, because all of the African countries that had been communist had gone to rack and ruin, and the Russia or Soviet Union was going down the tubes, but they were there supporting a man named Mengistu Haile Mariam, who was a despot to end all despots. By the time we got there, he had killed anywhere between 5 and 7 million of his own people it was hard stuff. One of the reasons we went was because Mengistu Haile Mariam had a cabinet like, like our president has a cabinet of 12 guys, and 7 of them were OSU graduates. Just because you're an OSU graduate, doesn't mean you're not killing people. So that was the problem. But I have a great story that I can only tell in Stillwater because only Stillwater people understand this. So when we go into a new city, whether we're working there a short time or long time, we generally take 2 to 3 days to really learn that city. And and not only to learn the city, because you're going to have to meet people and you're going to have to know safe places to meet them, but also to figure out if the local service will be after you. Yeah. And so my husband and I go into Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, run by the Soviets at the time, and everybody's killing everybody. And it was a dangerous spot, but we needed to figure out whether the Ethiopian service or the KGB was going to be after us and be following us. So we chose this Saturday, which was market day. We went to the market, and so we could keep track of each other. My husband had on an OSU shiny orange basketball jacket, with OSU on the back of it, and so I could see him, as he moved around, and I had on something bright, and we were moving. We both were carrying weapons. Now, let me tell you something else. When you watch those movies and those TV shows and all those CIA agents that they call have weapons, we don't carry weapons. Ours is an intellectual job. We are getting to know people, and I use this term in a positive sense, and manipulating them. We very rarely carry weapons. However, I'm a denied area officer. My husband was, and every place we served was a war zone, except for Turkey. So we carried weapons, but that's very, very rare. So don't believe that in the movies. But anyway, so we're walking, trying to see if anybody's following us. And sure enough, I mean, we get out of our car, and within minutes, there are 2 Ethiopian guys walking behind us. Well, we're trained in all this, we're hot shots and surveillance. So we're running them around and all that. And they're right on us every time, right on us. So we decide, well, we got to figure out what they're going to do. Are they going to shoot us? Are they going to? My predecessor had been taken captive and held for 6 weeks and had the stuff beaten out of him for 6 weeks. I wanted to know, is that going to happen to me or not? And, we had backup on this. So we decide we're going to walk into this, what you would think of as kind of a box canyon of stores, so that if we walk in and turn around, we have to walk back through them, and we have to force them to do something, either to step aside and just keep following us, or to take us into captivity, or to shoot us or whatever. So I have a purse with a weapon in it. My husband's got one under his arm. So we turn around, we walk back through these guys. And just as we come back through them, one of them starts to reach for my husband, and I can see my husband getting ready to pull his weapon out. And the guy says, "Hey, how'd the Pokes do this season?" See, only Stillwater will understand that. So they became good friends of ours, and we went from there. But so Ethiopia, after that, went to Sudan. The wall had fallen. The Soviets were in really bad shape and became the Russians, and we had all the new countries made out of the USSR. But we went to Sudan, next door to Ethiopia, because terrorism, political Islam, had really raised its head, and we were trying to find out whatever we could. And there was a young man that had shown up in Sudan that we had heard had shown up. His name was Osama bin Laden. He had worked in Afghanistan, and we needed to see what he was doing. So we went ahead and took a tour to Sudan, and that was my job, was to find out what he was doing. And also there was and when I talk to young people, they don't remember this guy at all. there was an assassin named that we called the Jackal. Do you remember him? He had killed a bunch of European politicians, and he was supposed to be there too. So while my husband was working with them, the Sudanese were helping us in wrapping up the Ethiopian, because the Ethiopian government had fallen while we were there, thanks to, you know, a lot of help. And so we were in Sudan. I was looking for Osama bin Laden and the Jackal, and as it turns out, the Jackal lived 2 doors down from us. So that was pretty easy. Turned him over to the French and did that. So we came back to the United States then. We'd been out a long time. Came back to the United States. My husband was head of the unit that was working all of the former Soviet Union states to get them to ally with us rather than the KGB, which had now become the SVR, the replacement of the KGB. And I was the executive officer at home. And in 1993, my husband was called by the president of Georgia. You remember the state of Georgia, the Russian Georgia, Edvard Shevardnadze, who had been the foreign minister for the Soviet Union. And the Russians, when the country broke up, when the USSR broke up, always assumed that Shevardnadze would be on their side because he'd been their foreign minister. He could not move away from Russia fast enough. He wanted to move Georgia to the west. He had met my husband before and said, literally called the president of the United States and said, I need Woodruff over here to help me build this intelligence service and keep it away from the KGB, the SVR. And so he did that. My husband went there on a temporary basis. And in 1993, he was assassinated by the GRU, the Russian military service. So that left me as a senior, as an operations officer, a single mother with 3 kids, including their mother. And I was supposed to be going to Yugoslavia because the Balkan Wars had broken out. So I was going to head that as chief of station there. But I couldn't take kids into a war zone. They just lost their father. That would hardly be a good thing. I didn't want to leave them behind, of course. So I went to Vienna and was head of counterproliferation. It is where we run our most important counterproliferation ops. And why would that be in Vienna? Any idea? Well, we have no diplomatic office in either North Korea or Iran, right? We don't have diplomatic relations with them. So we have to do it other places. And one of the places we do it is at the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. Vienna is what spies all over the world call Spy City. You are not a spy unless you've served in Vienna, Austria. The Austrians don't give a damn about what's going on in Austria. They don't care. But consequently, you do whatever you want. And it's right in the middle of Europe. And so, you can go anywhere. With the Schengen agreement that oversees all kinds of visas and who can come and go in Europe, Vienna is a free country and anybody can go in and out. So the Iranians, the North Koreans, anybody just gets on the train and goes to Vienna. So it's full of interesting people. So I served there and then was called back. This was the whole time I told you about Clinton had cut our service. And so I was called back after 3 years to build a recruitment center. So I became chief of recruitment for the clandestine service. And we had never actually figured out since, I don't know if you know the book, The Making of Men. It is what we used in the Second World War to train men going to war, particularly the OSS, the clandestine service in the Second World War. And we had never really since that figured out what we needed from officers. So we did figure that out and started recruiting people. Interestingly, we I said I wouldn't take the job unless I was allowed to advertise and get back on college campuses and you do all of that. So we started that. I then went off to another chief of station job and came back as after 9/11 as chief of Europe for the service because we were desperate to have European cooperation in counterterrorism. And I had a lot of those connections. So I became chief of Europe. I then had another job that I don't talk about, and I retired in 2007. So that's it. That's how we work. We build relationships with people who have access to secrets that our government needs to make better foreign policy. That's what our intelligence does. So questions? Yes.
I know we're about out of time, but
I'm sorry, I talked too much.
about the agency. Isn't there an aspect or private fair things that are not being asked?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We have that exercise about every month, figuring out what it is we know, what we don't know, what we should know. Absolutely. And we have all kinds of processes to go through that. It's an important part of the work we do. It's a great question. Never had that asked before. Yeah. Anything else? Yes. Well, look at what you need people to do. What I did for 30 years was to develop relationships with people who have access to information and to try to convince them to cooperate with the US government and to do what for them in their situation is committing a capital crime. And if they are caught, by and large, by their government or by their terrorist cell or whatever it is they live and work in, they will be killed. That takes a personality to be able to do that, to convince people of that, and to convince not only them to cooperate with you, but that you will keep them alive and safe. And then that you will turn them over to the next guy who comes along, because I'm only going to stay here for 2 years. Some of those operations, those recruitment operations, take 2 weeks because the guy's already thought it all out and he knows what he's looking for. And he will then look for the CIA, an officer that he thinks is a CIA officer whom he can trust. Some of those operations will take 20 years. So what do we look for? We look for people who have a lot of poise, have a lot of interpersonal skills, who can convey a trustworthiness, who are smart, who can write, because for every hour we are on the street, we write for about 4 hours. Because I'm having a meeting with someone, or I'm having, developing that relationship, there's nobody there but me. So I have to write that up in a way that not only my local office can understand, but it all goes back to headquarters. Now, unfortunately, everything goes back to headquarters. It's one of the reasons why we don't have many women in the service. Because if you're going to go out with somebody, you got to report it. If you're going to sleep with somebody, you have to report it before you sleep with him. And you have to tell your male supervisor and your headquarters office that that's your intention. That's hard for a lot of young women to do. So it doesn't seem to be very difficult for men to do, however. So that's the difference. Yeah. So those are the skills. I mean, it's and plus the danger, the physical demands, all of that. We have what I think and what is always touted as the best training in the world. We do a year of really intensive training. We do 6 months at headquarters and 6 months at our secret place. And then we do a year of training for the specific job that you're going to. And language always. as well. And we like native speaking languages. One thing that's interesting, what do you think is the most difficult native language for us to recruit for? I mean, recruit new officers for? What? What'd you say? Close. It is Spanish. Because Spanish families don't want their children to move away. Spanish speaking families. It is so hard. When I was chief of recruitment, I could not get a native Spanish speaker. Got a whole lot of gringos that spoke Spanish, but that's not good enough. I need somebody who looks it and speaks it in idiomatically. Couldn't get any. Yes. It's their mother. Yeah, when we were in Soviet Union, we had a coup attempt against Mengistu. So it was an internal thing, and we were caught out at the embassy. And my daughter, who was 13 at the time, their mother, and her sister, younger sister, and younger brother were caught at home. And in fact, we didn't know about the coup attempt until the kids were coming home from school, and their mother, my older daughter, who was 13, called her dad on the radio. We didn't have phones in Ethiopia at the time. Called him on the radio and said, "Dad, there's something going on here. Now let me read these tanks to you." And, you know, she could tell you what kind and what the weapons were and all of that. And she did that. She got home, and our embassy was on one side of the city and the house on the other. And they were stuck there for 3 days. As it turns out, the rebels who were fomenting the coup attempt were landing at an airport, an unused airport that was right on the other side of our house, about a quarter of a mile from our house. And they were shooting mortars over our house into the city. So these 3 kids, under the direction of my daughter, were in the house. They had a neighbor kid that they pulled in too, another American whose dad was UNICEF. And they were there for 3 days. And we did not know whether they were alive or dead. They didn't know whether we were. There was shooting going on all around them. She cooked for them, kept them entertained, did all of that. And in great, yeah, at 13. She is a big time chef, and she was hired away last year and is now the executive chef of the CIA. Isn't that funny? Yeah. Yeah. So that's probably secret. We don't do that. Anyway, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for that very fascinating program. So we do take women at Stillwater Frontier Rotary. We also support literacy, and we'll be donating a book to the Stillwater Public Library in your honor. Please